Welcome. This is an archive tape. My name is Fred Barzyk.
Michael Ambrosino.
Olivia Tappan.
We're going to take you on a tour of the building and try to give you some stories about the place before it's all torn down, because in just 3 months from today, which is the end of June 2006, in November, this will all disappear.
In 1955, the year WGBH went on the air, I drove from the Charles River to Harvard Square 2 or 3 times looking for the station and couldn't find it. I didn't know what number Mass Avenue it was. The reason I couldn't find it is because it was the top 2 floors of a regular commercial building. There were restaurants and a record store, Mrs. Schwann's record store, the Schwann of the Schwann catalog, a drugstore where Norbert Wiener used to come and hold court, and the top 2 floors were rented by WGBH, one half of it, and an electronics firm in the other half. And this was the plaque tied to one of the great Doric columns that said WGBH had been formed because several foundations actually gave all of their money to it and went out of business. The original building was an abandoned roller skating rink, and the floor was so uneven that we had to nail the damn thing down.
Hello, come on in. This is the present-day Connors Conference Room at GBH 125 Western Avenue. And I'm going to tell you a memory or two about this place. It is currently used for meetings large and small, presentations, but back in the 1964 and 1965, when I first started working here, this was the videotape library and traffic department, where tapes were shipped in and out, because back in those days, that's how tapes got from one station to another for broadcast. And in this room, there were rows and rows and rows of videotapes. And everything was a 2-inch videotape back then. Each tape weighed about 10 pounds, perhaps. Very heavy material. Friday afternoons, people used to stop in and they would share Cokes, occasionally a beer, I think, and talk about station gossip. Back behind this wall, where there's now a kitchen area, was a series of film editing rooms. Back in those days, there was more film going out on air than there was videotape. And at given times of day and evening, somebody would run out and say, oh, it must be time for a break, let's get some beers. So somebody would run out and grab some 6-packs of beer, and we'd bring them back in the editing rooms. And we'd all enjoy a beer or two while editing film. And then when the beers were done, back in those days, the ceiling was the kind where you could push up panels. So we would push up one of the panels and throw the beer cans up into the ceiling, up in the air cooling system. And when this room came under construction, somebody started taking down those ceiling panels and nearly got killed by falling beer cans.
This Connors Conference Room is famous for many things, but at the end is a lovely oil painting of Ralph Lowell. One of the great shames is that he's often thought of as the money man, and he provided the extra money that made this place go, which is true. But he was also the fellow, whenever WGBH was thinking of doing something serious or dangerous, he was the one who said, go do it. And so provided the station with not only the financial wherewithal, but the backbone as well, so that we knew that the head of the Board of Trustees was behind the station, and this was not a problem to be dealt with.
Well, I was on the crew in 1958-59, and Jack Hurley, who was then head of finance, would give me a cab slip. It cost $1. The cab would take me to Ralph Lowell's bank, Daddy Lowell, as we called him, and I would collect a little bundle. And I found out later That bundle was cash to pay for the payroll for that 2-week period because GBH didn't have enough money, even though there were only 40 of us. The state of the art at this moment was a projection. This is, remember, 2006. This was a high-def imported television, all in Japanese, so you have to kind of know the Japanese symbols to make it work. And the control box, I think built by John LeBounty, an engineer, had all of what was then considered the latest gear, which was a receiver, amplifying systems, speakers for here, betas, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and the continuous ubiquitous remote controls. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the state of the art of WGBH in 2006. I know this is now a kitchen, but once upon a time, this used to be editing rooms. And I remember one night, late at night, in through the front door came Dave Davis and Fred Wiseman with a package of film underneath his arms. And Dave Davis said to me, "You never saw this. This never happened." Because Fred Wiseman was cutting Titicut Follies here after hours, which became one of the few films ever banned by the legislature. It was a expose on the handling of mentally ill people at Bridgewater State. Michael Ambrosino says that it's no longer banned, but until a couple of years ago, I still think it was banned. This is a typical office at WGBH. Mac computer. This place was a Mac computer. I don't even know if Mac computers are still in existence now, for those of you who are watching this. This is classical WGBH FM radio. This is their offices. Look at that, huh? Oh. I remember that Bill Cavness would send me down to Briggs and
Briggs and Briggs.
Briggs and Briggs.
WGBH used to get records from Briggs and Briggs, open up the seal, use the records for open music or closed music, give them back to Briggs and Briggs, and they would sell them.
And that was our classical music library.
Yes.
There was a gentleman at WGBH by the name of Jordan Whitelaw who was the producer of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And he had a very, very particular way of making sure that certain kinds of announcing was done. Today, Tanglewood is handled by Ron Della Chiesa, a wonderful, charming guy who loves opera, but somebody that Jordan Whitelaw would have said, "What a meatball." This is the jazz area. This is the back door to 125. And I believe this is where the large sound box used to be for reverberation. They used to have a wooden box. Will Morton would have to turn on the box so that it would echo sufficiently enough to sound like we were recording in Symphony Hall. Do you know about that?
No, but I know that at one time we actually did have a orchestra in the studio, and we sent the sound to Symphony Hall and picked up the sound from the old BSO microphones and brought it back here to get the BSO sound.
Wow.
Before that, it was all tape delay
Yeah.
to get that round sound.
Hi, we're doing an archive tour of WG 125 as it goes down the tubes. Hi, your name is?
I'm Kathy Rose.
That's Dave Atwood over there.
Hi, Dave.
So what happens in this room?
This is part of broadcast operations. We keep the videotapes, and now more and more server files are under our area.
So
tape storage and sort of scheduling, programming, and records that from PBS.
And how long have you been at GBH?
Going on, I think, 16 years.
Typical of WGBH.
9 o'clock on a Friday morning. Michael Ambrosino's show goes on Tuesday. Ralph Sheets walks into the editing session. Freddie and I are there to make the edit. One day to shoot, one day to edit. And tears are coming down Ralph Sheets' face. And he says, "Michael, I have tapes 2 and 3 of Michael Ambrosino's show." And we said, "Where's tape 1?" He said, "I think we recorded the governor on it last night." Tape was so expensive. that you just used it over and over again. This station, each Christmas, would record Robert Frost with Louis Lyons. And Louis Lyons would say, "Well, what are you writing now?" And Frost would recite his latest poetry. That stuff's all gone. You know, we don't know where in the ether it went.
All right, moving down the corridor to FM Library. Your name?
Alice Abraham, 20 years radio.
20 years radio. Unbelievable, isn't this?
And
this,
AWF and everything.
yeah, this place is unbelievable. How people stay so long.
The collection here is over 80,000 recordings, CDs, LPs, though I'm carefully weeding out the LP collection in anticipation for the move.
Yeah, right.
But our format, programming format includes classical, jazz, folk, blues, and world music.
Has life gotten easier without Robert J. Lurtzmer?
That's not a fair question. I started my career here working for Robert J.
Okay.
Charlie Smith was the percussionist of Boston Symphony, Boston Pops. One of the stories that Charlie told Ron Della Chiesa for one of the BSO intermissions was that they were recording the Leroy Anderson syncopated clock. And so they went to Charlie, Fiedler went to Charlie and said, "Give me the loudest, biggest alarm clock you got." So Charlie went to the drugstore and said, "I want the loudest alarm clock you got." So drugstore, Mass Ave, sold it to him. They recorded the next day the Leroy Anderson syncopated clock. And the next day he returned it because when are they going to use this alarm clock for syncopated clock again? And then the druggist says, "What's the matter?" He says, "It wasn't loud enough."
And your name is?
Brian Bell.
And how long have you been here, Brian?
Oh gosh, I started in November of 1985.
Okay, now we're moving over to FM. This is one of the announced booths. You can look through the window. Nobody's there right at the moment. We're on the air, and it's just playing. And here's one of the other studios.
That used to be Robert J's studio.
And this is where Robert J. and Ron Della Chiesa sat. Any Lurtzemer stories? The first time I saw Robert J. Lurtzemer, he was wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and he was standing around during a show called Folk Music USA, because my lead guy, Dusty Rhodes, had a nasty habit of drinking too much, and Robert J. figured he could get on the air the first time that Dusty got drunk, and he did. He got on the air. He then became a FM personality, and he was a catchman in the circus. And he used to do push-ups and sit-ups and headstands in between while the records were playing. It was always an interesting thing to see a half-naked man standing on his head at WGBH FM radio. But that was Robert J.
He also was wise enough to know that when he did get the music bit from, 6 o'clock until noon, that he should do it for 7 days of the week. And that was one way of assuring that he would find an audience and the audience would be loyal to him. So he did that program 7 days a week for years and years and years.
We're going down into the FM studio where a lot of classical music, folk music has been run over the years. This is a slope here because they would move the instruments down here. And this is WGBH FM's large studio. It is constructed, I've been told, in a very unique way that there's air all around this so that there would be no sound of airplanes or any other noise. Totally, completely baffled. WGBH Workshop made a deal with a local producer by the name of Andrew Silver. He was going to do Kurt Vonnegut's short story called The Murderer. He hired James Wood, to be his lead actor, and he hired Minor White, one of the great still photographers of our time, to be his lighting person. 2 of the scenes were shot here with Minor White adjusting the lights. A very unique potential. Did it make any real difference? Not really.
More often than not, when this studio is available at lunchtime, we would come here and have yoga class.